Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Dave. Everyone says hi to
Jeremy.
you, Dave, huh? You're the popular guy.
Hi, Jeremy.
Thanks, Rita.
Hello,
No problem.
Now I don't have to cry later today.
Hi, first Jeremy. I would have said hi to you too.
I appreciate that.
I just wanted to come and say hello to everybody. I'll be kind of sitting off to the side here if anybody needs anything. So I'm around, but hello, everybody.
Hello, Chief.
Hey,
Hey,
Chief.
Chief.
Hi, Chief.
Is Lewis frozen like that? I think so. I don't know what's going on.
Frozen in time.
Carl, how's that? Chief Scalzo. Was that Chief Scalzo or Jeremy that was
No, that was me. It was
Okay.
ridiculous. You were just stuck there, kind of staring at me with a weird smile. So
no just so everyone knows, we're behind the scenes. We're letting everyone in, etc., because we have to have a control point. For our solicitors' knowledge, we are streaming live. I started the streaming now, so we're recording onto the website. So, Mayor, whenever you want, you can go ahead and start the meeting. It's up to you.
All right, it's just 6 o'clock now. I'll wait a few more minutes for Councilman Milan. I don't see him on yet. He did not. Rita, did he say anything to you about not being here tonight?
He did not.
He didn't say anything to me either about last night or tonight.
The invites are going out to the distribution list, Mayor.
Okay.
So I typically see everyone, if you accept the invite, I can see that.
Well, we have a pretty full agenda, so it's already 2 minutes after. So why don't we get us started? Call to order the stated session for January 27th, 2021 of Easton City Council. Please remain seated for invocation. May we who are merely inconvenienced by COVID-19 remember those whose lives are at stake or have already passed. And those who have no risk factors remember those that are most vulnerable. And we have the luxury of working from those who have the luxury from working from home. Remember those that must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May we have the flexibility to care for our children. Look and remember those that do not have that same option. May we who have to cancel our trips remember those that can never have a place to go. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, let us find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbors. We pray that the manufacture and distribution of COVID vaccine be efficient and effective in getting us and the entire world through these dark times. Lastly, we pray that we can come together as a nation and disagree without being disagreeable in a peace-loving manner. Amen.
Amen.
The pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America,
and to the republic,
which it stands, one nation,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Mr. Brown,
Here?
Mr. Ettinger, Mr. Milan, Mr. O'Connell,
Here.
Dr. Ruggles,
Here.
Mrs. Volcano,
Here.
Mayor Pianto.
Here. Approval of the agenda,
Move?
moved by Mr. Brown,
Second.
second by Mrs. Volcano. Any additions, deletions, or subtractions? Any amendments?
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. O'Connell.
I want to withdraw the ordinance for the West Ward.
Okay, you're withdrawing just the introduction, not the presentation.
Yeah, not the presentation, just the introduction.
Okay. You want to move that, to remove it from the agenda? Mr. O'Connell moves that we remove the item under new business, letter B, subparagraph 1, subparagraph B, from the agenda for tonight's meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Mr. Brown. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Ettinger,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Volcano, Mrs. Volcano,
Aye.
Mayor Pianto,
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
This time we have action on our minutes of our January 13th stated session. Any additions, corrections, or deletions?
Mayor
Move to
Pianto,
approve.
we have to approve the amended agenda.
Sure, I'm sorry. Motion to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a motion?
I'll
Move.
make the motion.
Moved by Volcano, seconded by O'Connell. Any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mayor Pianto,
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger.
Aye.
At this time, we'll have the action on the minutes.
So move.
Moved by Dr. Ruggles,
Second.
second by Councilman O'Connell. Roll call.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano,
Aye.
Mayor Pianto,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger.
Aye.
At this time, I'll turn it over to Councilmember O'Connell for an introduction of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm going to turn this over to Tom Jones to make a presentation on the West Ward Historic District Commission. I believe Tom is here as an attendee, so I would like to I'd like to now turn it over to Tom Jones.
I just, give it a second. David, I just brought him over.
Can you hear me, folks?
Okay.
We can.
Yes.
Mr. Jones, could you please,
Tom, thank you.
Mr. Jones, could you please state your address?
934 Butler Street, Easton.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, should I proceed?
Sure, please do.
I spoke with council person Dave O'Connell this morning, and he informed me about last night's workshop with council, and that to the best of my knowledge, that council does not want to proceed with the ordinance that has been submitted to City Hall, council, and also the mayor's office. So understanding that, and it also being removed from the agenda, I would like to make myself available for any questions, thoughts, or comments that you wish to make, because it's not just me, but there's also, as all of you understand, there are a lot of other people who have been working on this for about 2 years. It's was somewhat slowed down by the COVID virus. But I also understand some people are watching the council meeting and may speak up or may not speak up. So I think it's best, given the circumstance, is to see what thoughts or comments or questions that you may have, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Anyone on City Council would like to ask Mr. Jones a question?
Yeah, I'll start off, Mayor.
Tom,
Go ahead, Mr. O'Connell, it's your chairman.
okay, Tom, one of the concerns of the council members is that not enough residents of the West Ward are familiar with this ordinance. And I was just wondering if you could address that concern.
Well, over the 2-year process, as some of you may be aware, there were a number of meetings that were typically held at the Easton Area Community Center. The majority of people only came once. I was surprised at the first meeting that some of the significant landlord property owners in the West Ward did show up, and that was a rather longer meeting, and a number of their concerns were discussed and incorporated in the draft, which you have before you. Not only myself, but a number of other people, because some people in the West Ward don't have computers. They don't use computers because of the nature of the family households. We put up a number of posters throughout the West Ward, and then there was also a website, those who do have computers, so that they could follow the progress of the development of the draft. And as I said, there were some people only came once in the meeting, said their piece, and raised their issues and concerns or support. So what I would say is that there was a diligent effort here. And then before taking it to you folks, we were working closely with the Planning Commission and a procedure with them, which is in the public record of the Easton Planning Commission.
Mr. Brown,
Did you get a lot of positive?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. O'Connell.
Did you get a lot of positive feedback from these residents, Tom?
From the ones that participated directly, yes. Some people that raised significant property owners, I'll focus on the landlords without mentioning names. They came in having what I would call the typical concerns about what they could or could not do with the property. And then their questions, as I mentioned previously, were answered, and then their concerns were incorporated in modifications as we proceeded. There were changes in the draft as we move forward. And then also the chairman of the Planning Commission, Chad Elliott, who we all know, he gave what you folks are seeing a very thorough review. So there's been a lot of people looking at this over this 2-year process. But again, it was slowed down and made difficult by the virus.
Tom, Ken Brown speaking.
Hi, Ken.
How are you? Let me just say by starting off that you guys did a lot of work, and I'm appreciative of that. But I think at the same time, there's 2 things that I've been sputtering with, and that is, one, we already have a district in place, a board of commissioners in that position, and I don't understand why we would need 2. The other thing, a most important thing to me, is the hardship that this will bring about. Most of the people that live in the West Ward are low to moderate income, or just above that. And this would really be a hardship to them. I did read your relief, economic hardship, and it does speak to that. But at the same time, as we've been looking at our future in the West Ward. I think this is going to push people out. It's almost like telling them what they can do and what they can't do. That's just my thoughts. It separates a systemic in so many ways too, that you're looking at more people that can afford it, but yet you put them in a position where if something happens to their place and they have to replace something, they're going to have to come out of their pockets in a very harsh way that may not be able to afford it. That's just my thoughts.
Okay, I'll try to answer your two questions. First, on the commission, there were what I would call private conversations. We're in a small city, we talk with each other, and the Downtown Historic District Commission, the chairperson indicated that they had more than enough to do with the Downtown Historic District. And we're very, I don't want to speak for them because they weren't asked this formally, but we didn't then go there because they felt that they were busy enough working with the Downtown Historic District, which is listed on the National Register. Now, technically, the Downtown Historic District that's listed on the National Register does go beyond the jurisdictional control of the Downtown Historic District Commission. Generally speaking, there's a piece from 6th Street to 7th Street that's triangular in nature, going up Walnut. That's listed on the National Register.
Dutchtown area.
Yeah, thank you. Cut to the quick. The Downtown Historic District Commission doesn't do anything in there. And there was a lot of discussion about that. I do agree with you that that's something that if there would be any thought to discuss this further, this important aspect needs to be worked out. So in the draft that's here, there's a proposal and a number of people talked amongst ourselves about this is, well, then we're going to have to develop a different capacity. On economic hardship, that was also talked to an extent. And we had some contractors show up at some of the meetings in the West Ward who know by square foot costs. And then we talked with them, and without going into the document that you have, what I'll generally describe is that the Conservation District guidelines that are suggested here are more lenient than the downtown in that respect. And as a professional historic preservation planner, I think for the Downtown Historic District ordinance, we also need to do a better job of defining economic hardship. And I brought that at one meeting about 4 years ago to the Historic District Commission when they were going through decisions, and they said, excuse me, wait a minute, you're not talking about economic hardship. And to be honest, they didn't understand that, but I brought it to their attention. So I thank you for bringing that up. It's something that if there was a discussion to move forward, we would need to, as a city, to look towards technical assistance and tools to help property owners. Now, first of all, the proposed ordinance doesn't tell people you got to remove this because it doesn't look good. That's not the way it works. That's also not the way it works in the Downtown Historic District. And
I'm sorry to cut you off, Tom, but basically what it does says though, is if you have to replace, that's where the cost comes in at. If you have to replace, it must look like the way the home is supposed to look and fit in. But when you talk about that, we all know that takes a lot of money to do. And in that area, I don't think you're going to find many people that's able to be able to do that.
Well, we could discuss this in more detail.
Well, I think, let me just jump in here, Tom. What I
Sure.
said last night, there's some procedural problems with the ordinance. Number one, when we did the ordinance downtown, I was on the task force, and the chairman of the planning committee of city council was a member of that task force. No one from city council has seen this. We got this document, and it's about a 30-some page document, and there's some procedural errors in here. For example, you're only allowing people to serve on the commission that are registered electors, or you're asking for. I'm sorry, you're asking. That was the Civil Service Commission. We're doing that one tonight. You're asking for a registered architect. I don't know that there is one in the West Ward, or that would be willing to serve on the Historic District Commission. Right now, I have an opening for the downtown because I found out that the registered historic district architect has just moved out of the city, has moved out of the downtown, and he's moved into another municipality. Our charter requires that all members of the authorities, boards, and commissions be residents of the city. There's other things. For example, Act 167 requires that a survey be done of the district prior to regulation. They have to be certified as historically significant by the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission. Has that step been done?
No, it is not. There's been no completion on that.
Okay, so I think before we can even go any further, we have to work together. I have some issues about, same as Mr. Brown, that I need to get through. I really believe this is systemic. You're keeping people in systemic poverty because the definition of systemic is external forces, and you're putting an external requirement on these people to have to live up to a historic district standard that they may not be able to. Do we want them to maintain their homes in a good way? Yes, but whether you're going to I see this, and I got to be proven wrong. I see this as gentrification of the West Ward. I'm sorry. I know you got a lot of pushback on South Side. The same demographics on South Side are the same demographics in the West Ward. And I don't know why, if you got pushback on the South Side, why you want to move forward with this in the West Ward. I believe it's systemic gentrification, whether it's a person owner occupied that can't afford it, like Ken said. Maybe they have a family of four making $35,000 a year, or a landlord who's going to have to invest more money. Therefore, the rents are going to go up, and people of low means are not going to be able to go in there. So I do have some procedural questions that have to be addressed. For example, I think a lot of it's systemic. You talk about a person can be removed from the Historic District Commission for chronic absenteeism. Wow, that's subjective. You want to say 2 meetings in a row, 3 meetings in a row, but you can't make it subjective because it'll never get enforced. There's other things like I think you're allowing for vinyl designated to look like wood fences, but downtown district does not allow that. So yes, you are allowing some things to be a little different in this district than you are in the downtown district, but do we really want to do that? Do we want to make it so that it becomes so cumbersome that people don't understand what it means to live in a historic district? I just see these as problems. The photograph you have about build to the line, that's in our zoning code. You've got to build to the building line of that street. And the example that you put in there is in Wilson Borough. It's not even in Easton. It's the Pennsylvania State Health Association offices on 16th and Northampton, which is in the borough, not in the city. But my point is that you also talk in here, you're changing the zoning code. The height of buildings cannot be more than 15 feet above the average of the block. Well, we all know that the only way to really reduce rental rates is by density. And so if I have an average 2.5 story homes in the West Ward, I can only go 3.5 stories. And we know that that's just not going to be feasible for a landlord to do that. Your demolition section is onerous at best. I mean, it is really onerous. I mean, it's going to take a year to 14, 15 months before anybody can do anything with their property. So I just see some things in here that the financial hardship at the end, I need to work on that, because I don't think anybody should have to go to a public meeting and say, I don't make enough money to do this. I'm a financially hardship. I don't think anybody should have to do that. It should be done by staff. If they can show their W-2 form or their income tax return from last year. We did that with earned income tax. People making less than $6,000 a year now don't have to come before city council and ask for dispensation. I mean, that's ridiculous. Somebody have to come to a public meeting to say, you know what, I'm really poor. I mean, I just think that you're putting down poor people. But I really have my biggest concern, the procedural ones, we can work through that and get through that. And your letter says that you work with the solicitor's office, but our solicitor's on the phone, and Jeremy told us that he hadn't seen the ordinance, so I sent it to him. So I mean, there's a lot of legal things that legalese in here that we're going to have to look at. I just, for example, appointed by council, yes, but the charter requires that all members of the authority boards and commission are recommended by the mayor and approved by council. We need the same type of language in our ordinances. So I think those housekeeping issues can be done pretty well, but I really want to understand why Southside has been forgotten and West Ward is where you want to be. And let's face it, I mean, I'm not stupid. I don't have stupid written on my forehead. We all know what this is about. If you want it on College Hill, then let's talk about College Hill. But let's certainly not talk about the West Ward where you're going to gentrify and make all poor people, low, moderate income people in there feel poorer than they are. And I have an issue with that. And so I need to talk through that. before I can support it.
So can I,
Sure.
first of all, I thank you for all your thoughtful and critical observations. They're welcome, of course. To answer you as best I can on the south side, there were meetings attempted down there, but it was a very low turnout. And then the group of citizens that were working on this, we decided that there was very low interest by the residents that were there because they didn't come to the meetings. So then the concentration was on College Hill and then also on the West Ward. The other thing that one of the things that acted as a source of legal information for this is the Conservation District for the Borough of Pottstown down in Montgomery County. We can't do it here, but if you look up their demographics, it's a smaller community, but it's also a very challenged community. And they have this conservation district basically across most of their borough. The building stock, historic building stock, is similar to ours, and they also have a significant low and moderate income population. But there have been no lawsuits. I tried to check as best I can, and the conservation district is functioning well in that type of demographic profile. That is also true for inside the city of Lancaster. They have most of their historic building stock throughout the whole city in a similar conservation district. Outside their relatively very small downtown historic district listed on the National Register, and their conservation district has been functioning. And there is variation. We looked into this quite a bit. There is variation on the content of historic conservation districts within Pennsylvania, but it's a trend that's growing. And so what I would suggest is that if you, the mayor, and the council were willing, is that we look at this together critically, and I mean that sincerely, and to try and work this out so that it fits Easton and the community of Easton.
I also, in looking at the map, I mean, you go all the way down the Lehigh River, which includes the flats. Another affordable area of the city where we have fewer and fewer areas that are affordable. That's an affordable area of the city for people that are low, moderate income can afford to buy a home or a piece of property. I think this is a huge area. I mean, we used to identify the West Ward as Dutchtown area, Gallows Hills area, Easton Heights, Hay Terrace out there by Ashton Funeral Home. Those are, I mean, you start looking at that, I can understand it. I took a drive through the West Ward this weekend and took some pictures. I would admit, I mean, as I said to city council members last night, I mean, my wife and I spent a lot of additional money to make our house historically accurate. It was two units, now it's one unit, a single family. But
yeah, you have a beautiful house.
We've
Yeah.
gone through that, but I don't know how. There are people out in the West Ward who are maintaining their home, not the way you or I would think it should be maintained, but they're maintaining it. And I just don't know that any major improvements, for example, I mean, you and I don't like vinyl siding. We like concrete hardy board, whatever you want to call it, but it's a lot more expensive. You and I will replace our windows without vinyl replacement. We'll do vinyl clad or something that's more historically accurate, same size. We won't shorten or anything. But some people just, you know, they can go out and buy a $150 window. Now your windows you've taken out and you've made them as a recommendation, not a requirement. So I guess I should be talking about that. But some of the other things, I think I look at Jim Ettinger. I used him. I hate to use him as an example again tonight, but his home on the 1100 block of Lehigh Street is really nice. I mean, it's clean, it's attractive, but it wouldn't be approved by the HDC. The brick that he put on is not historically accurate, but it's a nice home. And people are, you know, painting isn't required by this, but certainly more and more people are starting to clean up their neighborhood and their property. And it may not be what I or you would want, but it would be like taking the south side. If you came into Lackner Heights and said, we're going to put a local historic district in Lackner Heights, you might get those neighbors to agree. But you're painting this with such a broad brush that I've got a lot of phone calls that are in opposition to this. And it's not just landlords, it's homeowners who are afraid of it. And a lot of that may have to do with education. I certainly understand that. I think Joel made a good point last night that if nothing else, this is an educational process for the homeowner of things that they can do that really aren't that more expensive. It's like when we had this, the Lehigh County Housing and Development Corporation did the old Sears Roebuck building. They put up scaffolding, they covered it up, and everybody was anxious to see the color, the paint that they were going to paint it. And, you know, we all know 5-color paint. Well, no, they did white brick with green trim. And we're like, oh man, what a letdown. We thought it could have been such an iconic property. And we're talking to them about trying to get something done there again. But I agree with you, Tom, on all this. I just don't know how we legislate this in its current condition. I can't legislate it, but I'm more than willing to sit down and look at it. But I think you could ask my staff. My staff knows that the area in Westward that probably is heavily traveled, the most traveled, other than Northampton Street, and is in really need of even some street trees. I keep trying to get us to concentrate on Butler Street from 15th to where it splits off into Wood Avenue and Walnut Avenue. It's just unfortunate. They're not maintained well. There's no street trees. The curbs and sidewalks are bad. If I was going to do something in the West Ward to make people have pride in the neighborhood, it would be a facade restoration program with grant money, and then I could do it. We had it over in the South Side in the 70s, and that worked really well. It was 3% interest. Today, you could probably get it for about 1%. So I'm not saying that I'm against the ordinance. I'm saying somebody has to tell me that we're not going to gentrify that neighborhood with higher rents and higher housing costs. I mean, I look at what's happened. The local historic district in downtown took us 30 years of constantly talking about it. And we finally got it passed in 2006, I think it was. And
Yeah.
I look at it now and I say, and you were a preservation planner at the time, and I look at the downtown now and our people can't afford it. I mean, there's 3 properties downtown that are for sale for over $2 million. I mean, these aren't big properties. These aren't, you know, big pieces of property like the 3 acres next door to the city hall. These are buildings that need a lot of work. I mean, the Easton Cafe and the building across from next door to it, that just sold for $2.1 million. Rachel has her property up on the Dunkin' Donuts, the Detweiler building, and a couple of those small buildings behind it for $2.6 million. I mean, I love the fact that, you know, we can say for the homeowners, it's great, but for people who are trying to buy, families who are trying to buy into Easton, it's very difficult. And I just need to be talked. I've done a lot of research on this because I'm really going against my own feelings about local historic districts and not supporting this. But I've done a lot of research that talks about, you know, the cost to the public and gentrification of poverty people. And I just want to make sure that we don't do that.
To address some of the points that you brought up in detail, first of all, that map, that's just showing the West Ward. And during the meetings, there was a lot of discussion, what is the West Ward? So that's something of all the things that's in the ordinance, whatever that is up to the final designation process by the city. and it might be something that's of a much different size, meaning smaller. Because you can always, as all of you understand, you can always amend something of this nature as it programmatically is successful. I strongly agree with you on the question of affordability. I live in the West Ward. I have for quite a number of years here, and my neighbors are all mixed. They're in medical. Some are security guards. Working three jobs to make ends meet. That dear friends of mine down the street. We're all close to each other, and the affordability issue has hit the core of the historic district of Bethlehem seriously for many years. This is something that does come when you set up things to preserve history to a certain extent. But without going into great detail here, because you have other business matters, there are other communities that have addressed this on a programmatic basis. So that a place like the West Ward, and the reason I like it a lot is because it is so mixed. When I walk down the street, there's a variety of people, varying income groups. I know the ones that have the doctorate, and I know the ones that don't even have a high school degree. And
that's why we love living in cities.
Yeah. So I think that this is something that could programmatically be looked at. And I think that we as a community, and I'm being an optimist here, it's my job to be that because I'm a planner, is that if we come up with a unique approach to this, it could be very fundable on a state and federal level. If we say we want to take this head on, because the market's going to do what it's going to do. We all know that. And the realtors are all talking about, because of what's unfortunately happening in New York City for a variety of reasons, people are coming out here, and houses in the suburbs. I heard of a house up toward Mount Bethel that sold within 5 minutes. There was a bidding war for it, and the price went up by $100,000. Now, it's just I could be wrong on this, friends. It's just a matter of time when that starts to come incrementally in the West Ward with starter families. And there are starter families who have already moved in that have high-end jobs. You know about them, Sal. Yep. And they live in the West Ward and they're happy. This one couple, he's one of the top toy designers in the world, works for Mattel. He now has 3 buildings. I won't say his name for obvious reasons.
Right. We know who he is.
Yeah. And he's wonderful, but he's bringing in other people that I know of. So this is a trend that we're going to have. We have, fortunately, our public housing units. But how are we going to do this with the housing units that are in our historic building stock? It's a question that I think if we look at it critically and openly together, we can solve it. We can be innovative.
All right, why don't I do this before I turn it back to Dave to open up to the public. Whoever would like to address city council, just the button at the bottom of the screen is raise your hand.
You have one hand raised. Well, now 2. So we'll start with the first one.
Yeah, no, hold on. I'm going to turn it over to Dave to let him do it. But I just want to say that my recommendation would be that our meeting that Dave, you call a planning committee meeting with city council on the Tuesday night before our February 9th meeting, February 8th, and we start this discussion and move it forward whichever way it's going to go. But at least we can address. I don't want to dominate this. I have 3 pages of notes here that I went through, and we'll make sure that Joel or Jeremy is available to go over the procedural questions that are raised, like the chronic absenteeism. I mean, and whether we have 1 board or 2 boards, and does the registered, it's not even the registered architect that's a problem. It's the real estate broker, licensed real estate broker. I don't know that we have any. We have Clay, fortunately, and we have also Ellen Shaughnessy lives in Forbes. Well, those are issues that we have to look at. So, Dave, I'll turn it over for you for public. Oh, Dr. Ruggles, we'll go to the council members first.
Yeah, I just want to say, I do have multiple questions on this. Is my impression tonight that we were going to hear a presentation and this wasn't going to be a question and answer session. So I did not have those available to me right now. But I do have several questions related to this proposed ordinance. And, again, I didn't have them all laid out for myself because I thought this was just going to be a presentation.
Good point. If we can ask Tom to maybe make his presentation at that planning committee meeting, and Louis, if you make available his ability to share the screen, he may want to put up some a PowerPoint presentation or something.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Anyone else from council have a question or comment or concern? All right, I'll turn it back over to our chairman of the planning and codes committee, Mr. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mayor. Louis, we have 5 questions in Q&A. I'm not exactly sure how to.
Well, Dave, if you'd like, I think we have, in addition to Mr. Groff, who I'm not sure wants to speak. I think he was making comments in the Q&A. We have other attendees with their hands raised. So do you want me to?
I think Mr. Groff would speak.
Yeah, why don't we let Mr. Groff speak, because he's the one who has all the questions in Q&A.
Well, his hand is
address.
raised, so we can let him talk first.
Okay. Very good.
Since technically he was putting comments in first as well.
Yeah,
Hello.
sure. No, let's do that.
Hello?
Go ahead, Richard.
Hello?
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. First of all, thank you for having this Zoom call tonight.
Mr. Groff, could I have your address, please? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm a resident of Wilson Borough at 425 South 21st Street, Easton,
Thank you.
Pennsylvania. However, I own multiple properties in the West Ward. My comments, for the last 25 years, I've made an investment in Easton, and particularly the West Ward. And I think it's a great place to have an investment and watch your owners grow their families. My greatest concern is exactly what the mayor said. Are we forcing systematic gentrification in an area that is immense? And it goes from 6th Street to 15th Street, from river to river. It includes multiple alley streets that are very unique. And are we actually saying what properties are historically important? My greatest concern is that recently we have sold several properties, excited because they were FHA buyers, which means, you know, their credit scores may have been 600, but the federal government decided they were going to be homeowners. Now, what does that homeowner have to experience if now when their windows, even though this property passed our buyer notification program, which is excellent, now they have to replace the window, and that absolutely perfect window now has to be wood. And like Moyer has pointed out, that is not a problem in this ordinance. But it's, again, are we trying to have systemic gentrification in an area where even I want to see more people own their homes? I think you could have a program where you identified specific historical properties and worked with those owners. But I'm not sure we want to, in Easton, say the entire West Ward is going to be in a conservation district. I did submit some questions to Luis, and maybe someone can answer them. Thank you.
Mayor, do you have access to the Q&A, or Dave, if you
Yeah,
want?
I mean, he did hit on some of these things about the FHA, and he sold houses for less than $100,000. Westward has many alley streets. Well, that Richard brings up a good point. That was one of the procedural problems. The ordinance recognizes alleys. The city does not recognize any alleys. We only have streets. So we need a definition that says alley is anything less than 30 feet wide or 40 feet wide, whatever a street is normally. I know what they mean by an alley. As Louis, as you know, I call it an alley, and Dave corrects me saying we don't have any alleys in Easton, we only have streets. We have private alleys, but we don't have any public alleys. So that is one area that needs to be addressed. The buyer notification program we talked about. Do we have a list of actual historical properties in the West Ward? And we're only going back to anything built before 1950s. Obviously, in the downtown, we have, 18th and 19th century buildings as well as new buildings. So there's a lot more historical buildings in downtown than there are in the West Ward. But there's a lot of properties out in the West Ward that are definitely hit the mark of being historical. And Richard's saying he doesn't want to punish the current local residents that own homes in the West Ward. And then Edward, it brings up a really good point, and we've talked about this, and this is what Dr. Ruggles has talked about several times before City Council. Why can't we get parking permits in the West Ward? Because like North Warren Street, there's not a lot of parking. It's something it's very voluminous and difficult to enforce, but the parking permit program, limiting people to two permits per household is not real good. I remember when I did have teenage children. At one time I had so we had 4 cars in the family, not 2. But it is a program that we're looking at. I know Dr. Ruggles has done a lot of research on other cities like Hoboken, New Jersey, that if you didn't have a place to park, it was your own fault. You had to pay for a parking permit, and you only got 2 per household. Unlike the parking permit program we have up at the courthouse, that just allows residents to park there without paying the meter. When the court's in session, they can't find a place to park. And the parking permits we have on College Hill, which are free, but those parking permits are basically only from late at night to early morning to keep the college students from parking in the neighborhoods, parking a car there for weeks at a time because they don't use it. So Edward, I don't know who you are, but it's something we are working on and we'd like to see started. So that's the only other question we have so far. Oh no, there's another one from Holly. I would love to see a program where homeowners, landlords could apply for conservation status. That's a great idea. This could entitle them access to programs like federal grants or a network of contractors who are vetted. That is a great suggestion, Holly. Thank you for that. That's a great suggestion. And we just started doing that with LRTA. LRTA is a program, that basically reduces taxes. You pay the same amount the first year, then 10% a year more each year for 10 years. So you get to 100%, encouraging people to fix up. And the city used to have like a whole area, like all of Northampton Street was a LRTA project. And we really weren't using it because there weren't buildings there. So what we've done now is we've actually picked the buildings that need to be restored and rehabilitated in the various neighborhoods in the downtown. And I'm going to school board next month again for 12 additions that we'd like to see get on the board. One of them happens to be a 1960 or 1970s urban renewal project that is absolutely ugly. But Holly, that's a great suggestion. I think that's definitely something that can come out of this. Okay, I'll turn it back to David. There's two people yet. Mark and Julie.
Does anybody else?
So why don't we start with Julie?
Bruce, does anybody else?
We'll start with Julie.
Okay, well, I think Julie can now.
Hi.
There you go.
Can you guys, I don't know if you can see me or, but you can hear me, right?
I can't see you.
Could I have your address, please?
Yes, my address is 1032 Lehigh Street in Easton.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for letting me speak. I'd like to talk about the substantive issues that were addressed and the concerns about the burdens on homeowners. 65% approximately of the West Ward are rentals. So really the burden of this initiative is largely on investors. And let me give you a very egregious example of an investor who bought a property recently in the West Ward, and in my opinion, severely damaged it. And that's at 743 Washington Street. That property, which is near the courthouse, has a absolutely beautiful facade. Rather, the window is rounded and it's really unique. And the new owner ended up putting this kind of rock cladding throughout the facade, and it looks horrible. And I think it not only brings down the property value of that particular property, but also of the entire neighborhood. I've lived here in the West Ward for 13 years. I own or have an interest in 4 properties on Lehigh Street. In the 13 years I've lived here, I can tell you that this neighborhood is very, very, very far from gentrification. I do understand there are people moving in, and I've met a lot of the new homeowners, but it's really been a very small trickle. And I think, from my point of view, the systematic problems with the West Ward and the poverty here is that public monies alone will not lift the West Ward. Private investment is absolutely needed. And the greatest asset the West Ward has is its housing stock. So I think that you want to preserve that asset if you are looking at all for a kind of healthy economic zone, in the West Ward. And I wanted to add that research shows that living in an opportunity zone increases wealth and well-being for the poor, for low-income people. Now, if you essentially say you would be doing more to keep the people in the West Ward in poverty by not acting on this initiative than you would be by acting on the initiative. And the reason is you need to have some private investment, some homeowners start changing the balance between rental and home ownership, and starting to fix up their homes. And through that, people moving in and the investment, your schools are going to improve because there'll be more of a tax base here. And the people who are going to those schools, whether they're poor or not, will benefit from the added investment in the community. So, rising property values also lift all boats. Okay, it creates wealth for low-income homeowners. Now, if I look around at my neighborhood, a number of people on my block on Lehigh Street are homeowners. And I think that's why my block is actually one of the more stable blocks in the entire West Ward, because a lot of homeowners who have lived on the block for years and years and years are still here. Now, if their property values increase, that benefits those people. It benefits them in growing their wealth and their opportunities, and also any estate they may leave to their families. So I feel like this idea that, hey, do this in College Hill, not in the West Ward, is really not thinking it forward. And really, it will do ultimately an injustice to the people who live here, all of the people, including the people who have low incomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. You make some good points.
Louis, does anybody else?
If I could just address Julie, she makes some really good points against my argument, or it's not an argument, it's my position that gentrification it comes in many different ways, and one of the ways is by putting external controls like historic districts, and maybe the historic district. I mean, I agree with you. I dislike lick and stick stone as much as you do, but unfortunately, we're seeing more and more people using that product. The product, there's a house in the West Ward that's probably cost about $750,000 that the guy his family built They tore down an old house and built a new one. That doesn't become reality anymore because the house he bought, it was structurally sound. People lived in it, but he just didn't like it. So he tore it down and built a new one. And he probably spent about $750,000 between buying it and putting up a new one. So I understand what you're saying about new money lifts all boats, and maybe if we could outlaw lick and stick blocks and stones in the city, that would be a step in the right direction. But I do see a lot more of that being used.
Louis, does anybody else have their hand raised?
We do. Tracy, if you can let Mark Calafatello speak.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Am I being heard?
Yes, you are, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So,
Mark, can I have your address, please?
my address is 240 Skyline Drive in Williams.
Thank you.
I've been involved and continue to be involved in multiple properties in the West Ward. The majority of them were abandoned when we took on the renovations. I also have done the same thing in the historic district. And I appreciate and understand the spirit of saving, preserving, improving the housing stock. I think the spirit of the conversation is fantastic. My concerns have to do with using a stick instead of a carrot. As a developer, I don't have the knowledge of state funds, federal funds, low-income funding to support people in improving their homes. Those are the type of things that would be supportive, inclusive. They wouldn't be chasing people out of town. Quite frankly, you guys have all covered that a wide paintbrush over the West Ward. It's just an untenable conversation. The other thing that doesn't really add up for me is where's the money coming from? Not so much for the owners of the properties, but for the government, because no one here has kind of discussed how it's going to be enacted, enforced, inspected, and the amount of guidance that will be necessary to properly support people in successfully executing what you're requesting of them. So it is a deep pool. The spirit of it is great. I'm all for seeing a support of preserving significant properties and supporting homeowners and investors in improving their facades and their neighborhoods. And I don't think that the way you're approaching it is going to execute the results that you're looking for. I also think it's going to bury the infrastructure of the government and has a lot of parts that, Sal, you're kind of discussing that they need to be flushed out. So I guess my request is to approach an idea that's simpler, that supports the spirit of the idea, without getting bogged down in something that clearly is going to require more government employees, which is going to cost significant amounts of money at a time where I just can't imagine the city seeing that as a logical path. So between folks being tight, you have new money coming into the area, which is great. People that are inspired to fix up the homes they've purchased. Again, a carrot idea, supporting people, having some type of a program to help people see what's available that would help them make improvements. As an example, I just did a property where the facade grant gave me the funds to go from vinyl to wood and clad. So I was building it anyway, but because of a facade grant, that extra funding was able to allow me to improve and upgrade what I was already doing. So for me, that's the kind of support and incentive that I think is a win-win that doesn't come back with any ill will. So I appreciate what you guys are trying to achieve. I think it's a great direction. I'm just concerned that the path is riddled with potholes, and that there might be a simpler, faster way to achieve some of the desired results without getting bogged down in the all of the parts of it that are difficult. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you for all the investments you've made. Your projects are really, really nice. I was just saying, last year in my state of the city, there's a house in the West Ward, as I said, probably cost over $700,000 by the time the gentleman was done. I took pictures of it and used it in my state of the city because the mayor's restoration award went to the law firm on 7th Street, right across from the county courthouse, who I mean, you would have never guessed what was underneath that vinyl siding, or actually that was aluminum siding, was so old. And they did a phenomenal job of bringing back the windows and the arched windows and things. And there's a lot of really nice homes and buildings in the West Ward. And you're right. I think we need to look at that and protect them, but somehow make it so we don't gentrify the neighborhood by having people like you. If we use a stick and just say you have to do this, then all of a sudden we can't complain about affordable housing on one end and then require people to spend more money, or developers to spend more money to build what they're going to build. And that's the balance I'm trying to look at on this ordinance. So I think it's a good discussion. Anyone else, David?
Louis, does anybody else have a hand raised?
Yes, there's a Walt Bonstein.
Okay. He's muted.
Yep. Let's give one second. Okay.
Hello?
Hey, Walt.
Hello, Walt.
This is Walt Bonstein. I'm with Terry Briggs.
Could I have your address, please?
Terry, your address in Easton.
140, excuse me, 140 Springfield Road, Williams Township.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't have any questions for anyone. I would just like to make a general statement. First and foremost, I would like to ditto what Richard Groff had said, that in effect, he and I also own, well, I also own properties in the city of Easton, especially in the West Ward. And I believe what we have done, not just together, but also through what I've done with due diligence in the 600 block, with a lot of the properties, what I will call on the flats. I'm a lifelong resident, born, bred, and die. 68 grad of Easton Area High School.
You didn't die yet, Terry.
I think I'm older than you are.
Only by a year.
But anyhow, I take, and I think many people that surround me take great pride in what they do with their entire properties, both rentals and residentials. I cannot say more about my 600 block. One of the greatest examples would be this past snowstorm. My people came out, didn't ask, didn't do anything, shoveled for 12 hours to get everything done within less than the 24 hours to do, because they live there, they walk there, they like it there. My people are low income. They deserve the right to be there. They deserve the right to have good housing, quality housing, without the expense of $1,500 to $1,600 per unit that are going up in places, which I say is fine. I think it's great for the values of properties, but at the same time, I think we should just look and take a step back without going into historical. I look at more what we need, and this is going to be a terrible thing to say possibly with everybody. Dave, you and I are friends, I know that. But the idea of being that we have buildings yet that should absolutely be torn down. We all agree. I'm going to use just one, and this is throwing no one under the bus, but it's been, and I've been on it through Steve Narowski and everyone else for the last 8 years, is 675 Pine Street. I hope it's on the agenda soon. And what a great thing could be done there for the redevelopment authority, who has done such a great job in that 600 block. New owners, let me repeat, owners looking across the street at this deplorable situation and what could be turned into, which I offered many years ago, to turn into a parking lot. I know that's always a thing. Easton is always in need of parking, but in it, and it is an alley. But across the street from those people would have private parking spots, things like that. There are so many of these little areas that could be so much done. I'm all for this as far as keeping the historic area. I like caves, and you'll know what I mean. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, I know what cave you're talking about.
A little bit of levity, Ken. Thank you also. A little bit of levity. I'd love to smile there. But bottom line, in conjunction of this, levity is needed, but at the same time, I think we should just take a little bit of a step back and look at individual type things, which is difficult. I know that. But at the same time, it's a great idea. But I just think that it's necessary. That's really, I'm totally for it, with the conjunction of doing it correctly. And I don't think right now, and again, I'm going to say it, during this pandemic, I was just made aware of this last night. I am not technologically savvy. My brother-in-law was kind enough to do this tonight. I would have never even known about it as an owner, investing for over, 40 years in our city. And I just think we should take a step back and maybe relive it a little bit and rethink it. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Terry. Anybody else, Louis? Anybody else have their hands up? Anybody on council have any final comments? Okay, Tom, before I end the meeting, and we'll have another planning committee meeting on February 9th, the night before our first council meeting for February, at which time hopefully you'll be able to make that total presentation, and we'll discuss it further.
Dave, what's the date of that again? In February?
February 9th. Yep.
I'm putting
6
it down.
p.m.
And we'll be doing this through Zoom, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Yes.
Mhm.
And if there are no further comments, I'll just close this hearing and turn the meeting back to Mayor Panto.
Thank you, Councilman O'Connell. That was a very good discussion, and I appreciate all the input from the public and from our council members. At this time, we'll go on to our presentation about the pocket parks from Ohms.
Nick has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nick. Nick has his hand up. Nick, is this? I think I know which Nick it is, but I'm not sure. It doesn't have his last name, so Nick, you're on. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself. Bottom left-hand corner.
Mayor, remind him I'll need his full name and address, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Nick, you need to unmute yourself. It's the bottom left-hand corner. There we go. Now you're on.
Okay.
Name and address, Nick.
So my address is 6367 Franklin Hill Road, Bangor.
What is your last name, sir?
Alfero, A-L-F-E-R-O.
Okay.
We've been in the West Ward since the late 70s. The folks in those neighborhoods, I've lived off and on in the West Ward. The folks in those towns are like family to us. In the wintertime, we clean the streets, then the city comes, picks it up. So it's a very tight-knit community. As somebody mentioned, it's low income, so to speak. But today I went out, and Sal knows that I do this. I went to 25 houses. And when I went to the 25 houses, I passed out when this meeting was and what was going on. None of the 25 residents or businesses knew anything about this. This is a problem. Everyone I talked to, I can't speak for them or whatever, but they said they were against this. There's a lot of things that I agree with Councilman Brown. He raised a lot of good points about what we can afford, what we can't afford to do with these places. The mayor as well raised a lot of good points. There's the cost, being a contractor for over 40 years, the cost of some of these materials and what they're going to cost and what it's going to take to do these things at this point in time are not reasonable. Now, I attended one of the meetings that they had at St. Anthony's Youth Center, which is now the
His number. Okay.
community center. That's the only meeting I knew about. So again, the public is not, in my opinion, being informed correctly to what's going on. And with some of these things that are going on, as Terry mentioned, Briggs, you know, we'd have to raise our rents by at least 50%. So in today's world, for a one bedroom, we're getting 600. We have 11 properties. There's no way that's going to happen. The West Ward has bigger and problems to solve and deal with, because when I went, for example, to Unimart today, look at that building over there. It needs to be painted. We have a problem today that was started with between the 1200 and 1300 block of Ferry Street. New people moved in. There's garbage everywhere. I got to go to the code people to discuss this. We need to handle the things that are in front of us today, not what's in the future. I really have nothing else to say, but I don't think right now this is the time or place for this to happen, because the community cannot support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else there, Louis? I don't see anyone else's hand raised.
I do not, Mayor.
Okay, we'll close this, and we'll hopefully that people will rejoin us on February 9th at the Planning Commission meeting. Dave, am I going to turn it over to you? I see you just came alive there on the screen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Mr. Edinger, should I go ahead?
Yes. Dave.
Just in the interest of time, I'll give a brief introduction. As Council's aware, we have several smaller parks located in the West Ward and South Side that for many, many decades have seen some underinvestment, and you know, they could be better. You know, they could be better parts of our portfolio, you know, if they were more well thought out. So we received a grant back in 2019 to do master park planning for these smaller park areas to see, you know, what the future might hold for them. Through an RFP process, we hired Omnays. They're located out in the Silk Mill. They have 3 of their folks on the call tonight. I'll let them introduce themselves. And we went through, you know, basically we had two large picture items. One was public outreach and participation to see what in fact people's thoughts were about the future of the parks. And the second part of their charge was to develop some conceptual designs based upon the input from the public. I think they did a great job. We had a really, I think, an encouraging amount of public participation. I'd also like to thank Amy Bocadoro. She was a big help in this effort. And so I will turn it over to Laura from Omnays, and she can show you what we found out.
Thanks, Dave. I'm wondering if I can share my screen.
You should be able to now, Laura.
All right. All right, that worked, yeah?
Yep, that works.
So let me do this. Okay, so thanks. I'm Laura Sedenfeld, so I'm the principal at Omnaze. So we're a landscape architecture, planning, and art studio, and we're sitting in the Silk Mill right now. So both myself and my teammates, Emily Van Wagner and Sheila Fuentes, we live and work in Easton. So this is a project that's been pretty close to our heart, and we've been really excited to work on this with you. So I think Emily's going to talk a little bit about some park design. Sheila's going to talk about Nesco Street and some of the findings that we've had there. But really, I think this is the next generation of pocket parks. So like Dave said, this is the opportunity to really evolve your portfolio of parks. There are other pocket parks within the city of Easton. These were the ones that were the most in need. So these are ranging from about 3,500 square feet to 0.6 acres. So they are small but mighty little spaces. And what we really confirmed through this process is that these are powerful spaces for a lot of these neighborhoods. And there was a really robust public engagement part of the process. This is picking up on what was started back in 2018. And I think the city realized just that there wasn't enough engagement to move forward with any sort of certainty to the parks. And at that time, it was an evaluation of, do these become parks that get enhanced? Does it become, a space for some sort of community amenity, or does it become private housing? So we've asked those questions. And I think what's great is, the reports that we're handing over to you are really outlining exactly what the community wanted to see in these parks. So there's transparency about that. And we did ask people if they wanted to see this as any kind of private housing, community services, things like that. And it was interesting, what we learned overwhelmingly is even if people didn't know that these parks existed, they answered, I want to see this as a park in the future. So we have some data, which I'm sure for city leadership will be really interesting to kind of dig through. Really, the community is the driving force behind this entire thing. We started this process about a little less than a year ago, and it was right before COVID. So it took us a minute, but we did a quick pivot to basically change all of our community engagement so that it could be socially distanced and actually meaningful for people, not conflicting with some really important public health messages at the time. So what we did was we created eastonpocketparks.com, which is still active. It's really the hub of the project. It's a bilingual website, it has a bilingual survey inside of it. And not everybody has internet access within the city of Easton. So we went out and we put park signage into all of the parks. It directed people to a survey, the website, and contact information if they had any sort of requests, ideas, or just wanted to talk with the designers. And in order to get people out into these spaces, but do it with social distancing, we created essentially an art piece that happened over a series of 2 weeks. So it was called Pinwheels in the Park, and my team assembled in our living rooms 1,500 pinwheels, put them in 7 of these pocket parks. Everybody was encouraged to go out and essentially get a bouquet of pinwheels, visit the parks, and then give input. So pretty much within that weekend, we got a majority of our responses, which I think was nearly 200. Tracy was really great with the city. She got some great coverage with PBS, local media, news stories. So we had a lot of participation. And then to follow up with this, we actually had Pop in the Parks. This was supposed to be local. So we went around and put flyers on doorsteps in front of people within a 1-block radius of the park. And for 1 week, we sat out in the parks each night and had community discussions with masks on, social distancing. So everybody really had an opportunity to speak and tell us what they wanted to see. We went back to the studio, we analyzed all of the data, came up with metrics, and came up with park concepts that was really in direct response to what the people said. So we're here right now. We are doing city council review. And what's intended is then, this is really the comment period for all of you as leadership to look at this, the public who's listening to weigh in. And after that, we're going to take all of this feedback, synthesize it, and actually come up with cost estimates. So just keep in mind tonight, we haven't assigned costs to these parks, but we have been keeping budget, maintenance, and sort of high impact, low cost solutions in mind. And finally, after we get that information, we're going to issue the final report, of which you've seen a draft. And then I think it will be up to Dave and his team to start applying for grant funding. So that funding is going to be really important to look at future park improvement opportunities. These are some really high level pieces of data that we got from the public. This was mostly from our online survey. So we got a lot of participation from the West Ward, which probably is in large thanks to Amy Bocadero and her network. The age range, I would say, is fairly well distributed. We did get a lot in this 35 to 44 age range, which is good because it actually indicates these are people with families. So we got a lot of input about people with kids, what they wanted to see here. And then this, I thought, was an interesting question, if COVID has affected people's patronage of the parks. It's basically a third split in between, they go less often, more often, or it hasn't really changed. But I thought this question about people slightly skewing to going less often is interesting. And it should be noted, it's really taken early in the pandemic before we sort of knew that we could go outside. So this was around like March, April. So just keep that in mind. Overall feedback, people really were asking for basic community needs and services, more opportunities for development and growth, and then programming. And then also within the parks, people really want these main parks to have beautification, art, maintenance, and safety were also key issues for people. There was kind of a narrative from people that's not so much now, but in sort of a nearer past, there were some not friendly family activities happening in the parks. Amenities were being vandalized and then subsequently taken away. So what people sort of cited is that amenities are not available. So there's not as much gathering and activity happening in the parks currently. All right, so 7th Street Park, we're going to talk about. This is in the West Ward. It's a really prominent park, and I would say an overwhelming majority of people wanted it to remain public. So about 2 years ago, there was a group of parents who wrote the city asking that it remain a park and that the park be repaired so that their children can actually use it. A lot of kids run around here, but there's old posts and things stuck out of the ground that prevent kids from playing safely. Generally, they're asking for maintenance and gardens and just general upkeep. They wanted community gardens, which they've actually volunteered to help upkeep. We thought was great. Lighting was requested in this space. Sometimes in the summertime, kids are playing late at night. And also help for this very steep slope entry. So what our plan does, we're introducing this sloped amenity right here. So this is an ADA access path to get people up to the top of the site. There's really simple seating. This also sort of acts as a ball barrier for when kids are playing. Integrate signage, a place for parents to look out. You'll see in the back, there's a new perimeter fence. This is an opportunity for art. We could also work with the neighbors to have some art on adjacent facades. And you'll see we have community gardens here with this little sunny spot. There could be something fun like swing chairs for people. This is fun for kids, fun for adults. And the other thing that we really thought of and that we heard from people was they wanted more maintenance, free planting, things like pollinator gardens, and also things that could be edible gardens were very interesting to people. Bushko Park, this is a great little pocket park. We thought that this had really good bones. So there are a lot of neighborhood kids around here that play. There's an existing ADA ramp which is in the front of the site, and it gets you down to the sloped lawn. So this is a place that needs a lot more site amenities. There's no really good place to sit here. There's some issues with drainage and grading, and people are asking for places to play, to garden, to sit, and even potential opportunities for nighttime programming. So what we're proposing here, we're actually revivifying this existing courtyard, using all of the existing paving, really just cleaning things up, adding more seating. And this is a little overlook, which could have bar seating, a great place to pull up if you wanted to work on your computer and have a coffee, or maybe you have a kid who's running around on the green that you want to look over. So this is just a really sweet spot where we're using the good bones that are already there. And then toward the bottom, we're really rationalizing this, making this a big open green, putting some native plants around the side. And you'll see there's this climbing structure. We're really emphasizing nature play inside of all of these parks. It's really good for kids neurologically, for their motor skills, and to be in touch with nature. And the other thing is, these are pretty destructive. You can try to set these on fire, but honestly, they're the company who makes them touts them as fireproof. So we thought that would be really good for maintenance and operations. You'll see here, there is a deck which actually extends the area that people in a wheelchair for ADA access can use the space, and it's overlooking a screen to activate the space. Jackson Street Park is, this is one of our favorite parks. It's also one of the most in need. So there's a lot of dying trees. There are some complicated sight lines, which make the space feel not so safe for people. And overwhelmingly, people wanted this to remain a park. So what they're asking for is a lot of areas for play. So getting kids back in the park, having places for seating, potentially nighttime lighting, and then just general amenities. So what we did, we are reusing what we think is a really cheerful existing pavilion in the middle of the space and sort of recentering activity. There are some hazardous trees, some within the site and some at this adjacent neighboring site that need to be taken down. You'll see there's fallen branches all over the site. So what we're proposing is to open up the views so it feels really safe for people and actually use the slope of the site. So you could integrate play for children, just use really simple boulders that are gonna last forever and have spaces for kids to kind of crawl around within the site. And then toward the back, one innovative idea that we thought of is you could actually use some of the large limbs from the adjacent trees and reconstruct a sort of nature play area for kids. So there's a lot of climbing, and also amenity-wise, there's a lot of seating for parents here. And you'll see also in the presentation, we've integrated signage within the parks. We had temporary signage as part of the public outreach, but we really think it's important that we integrate signage so that this gives the parks identity and that the neighborhood can really claim them and understand that they're parks, that they're for their own use and not for just the immediately adjacent neighbors. All right, and Sheila, you're.
Thanks, Laura.
Yep.
Looks like you just exited out of full screen. So Nesco Street Park is a 1,200 square foot parcel in Southside. It sits between Nesco and Holt Streets. It's a paved space right now surrounded by open fencing that's reached via this sloped path that's not currently ADA accessible. And Nesco is of really unique significance because of its history, which we began to uncover during the Pop in the Parks community feedback session there. Many residents in the neighborhood told us that they and their families had lived there for their entire lives. And one gentleman who we spoke with mentioned to us that he had grown up hearing that Nesco was at one time an African-American cemetery. There was nothing in the documentation or information that the planning team had at that time that mentioned a cemetery there. So we did begin to investigate, and we're pretty quickly able to confirm that that information was correct and that the site is in fact a historic Black burial grounds. Laura, can you advance to the next slide? So the pandemic has made archival research a bit of a challenge, but we were first able to confirm the existence of the burial grounds with some guidance from local historian Leonard Buscemi. This map that you see at left is a detail from an 1874 atlas, and the black and white one just to its right is from Mr. Buscemi's book about Southside, annotating the location of the Nesco parcel as a black cemetery. Mr. Buscemi also pointed us out to some archival newspaper records that date back to the post-Civil War era of the Nesco site as a burial grounds for African Americans. That was at a time, when racist and pervasive Jim Crow laws, as well as common custom, imposed racial injustice to such a degree that segregation was enforced even in death, with Black people generally being prohibited from being buried in cemeteries for whites. So, the Nesco Street site is not unusual in the sense that in many places across Pennsylvania and indeed across the country, African American burials during the Jim Crow era were relegated to informal or unmarked cemeteries that were neglected or forgotten. So, while this isn't necessarily an uncommon circumstance, it is really culturally and historically important. Once we confirmed the existence of the burial grounds there, we continued investigating and were able to actually determine the identity of at least one person who's interred there, a Black Civil War veteran named George Hoff, who served the Union Army as first sergeant in the United States Army during the Civil War. After the war, Sergeant Hoff returned to Easton. He started a family here with his wife, Harriet. Here, sort of that middle image at bottom, you see his muster roll from his enlistment in the Army. And also to the left, you can see census records that we were able to locate for him and his family in the 1870s and 1880s. He had children and grandchildren in Easton, and it's likely that further genealogical study will identify other living descendants, as well as determine the identities and descendants of other people who are interred at the site. Based on all of our initial research, we do believe that it's very likely that the remains of Sergeant Hoff and others are still interned at the Nesco site. We found no record or mention of their removal or movement. And that fact is really critical, not only, of course, to understanding the site's history, but also to planning for its future. Upon confirming, the site's history as a burial ground, we did contact the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO for short, for guidance. They're a tremendous resource for information about these kinds of rediscovered sites. And they've actually been documenting African-American cemeteries and other significant sites of African-American history in Pennsylvania for a project for the last couple of years, though they did not have this site in their database yet. Based on SHPO's guidance and all of the historical findings to date, we did determine some initial recommendations. At this time, no active park uses should be introduced or plans made for the parcel until further site study, research, and engagement can be completed. As a first step, the city will need to determine the status of the remains that are interred there through a site study. An archaeological consultant should be engaged to perform a ground penetrating radar study that will reveal the exact extents of the burial grounds of the site and sort of where things lie. SHPO actually offers grant opportunities that could support such a study. And when we spoke with them, they seemed really enthusiastic about the notion that, that this would be compatible with the grant opportunity that they have. Going forward, the city will also need to ensure that any plan or process regarding the site's future is in alignment with all state and federal laws regarding cemeteries and their respectful treatment of remains. SHPO, again, is an excellent resource for information regarding these issues. There's a lot of laws that are state laws in Pennsylvania that date back to the 1920s and 30s that are sort of complicated. And so SHPO's regional office is very knowledgeable about exactly what those are. And while the physical extents of the parcel have to be understood, more historical research also needs to be undertaken just to learn more. Here we can really start to think about, building a partnership of community groups, historic organizations, and volunteers to dig deeper into the archival and genealogical records that will help confirm the identities and individuals interned at Nesco. There are lots of funding opportunities that might be appropriate for organizing that work. The Lehigh Valley Engaged Humanities Consortium, among others, has a local fund that might be a good match. And there actually may be federal funds coming available for this kind of work in the near future. Just 2 weeks ago, actually, the United States Senate unanimously passed the African American Burial Grounds Study Act, which would set up a voluntary nationwide network of Black burial grounds, as well as provide federal funding and assistance to ensure that these kinds of sites are preserved and maintained for future generations. And you know, as the historical context of Nesco becomes more understood, there will also need to be further transparent engagement about the site's future, in particular with any living descendants who might be identified or ancestral communities of the individuals interred there, as well as with the larger Easton community. You know, and I think the city might look to the public process that has taken place for similarly rediscovered sites, such as the Bethel Burial Ground in Philadelphia, and to organizations like the Pennsylvania Hallowed Grounds Project, which is a preservation network for the burial sites of Black veterans who, like Sergeant Hoff of Easton, served in the USCT during the Civil War. Ultimately, we know that Nesco Street is a really important place. There's a lot to be learned about it and from it. And you know, the work of uncovering and making known its past will be really critical in developing a plan for the parcel's future that both acknowledges its history and honors those interred there. I think we'll go to the next park, which Emily will introduce.
Hello, this is Emily with Omnes. So the next park that we're looking at here is Centennial Park. And this is actually one of the more well-known parks included in the study, and it's also one of the most active. So community feedback at this site was really focused around increasing safety and also improving amenities. Specifically, residents were requesting better nighttime lighting, enhancing the playground equipment, and also incorporating more tables and seating and sports and recreation equipment. And while we were having the pop into the park sessions, the park was actually filled with young teens who were utilizing both the basketball courts and also socializing at the playground. And when talking with them, they requested places to hang out with their friends and also to have lines painted on the basketball courts and to have them switch to half courts instead of full courts. Also during the pop into the park session, other residents were suggesting to obtain the adjacent vacant properties and either turn them into an extension of the park or to provide a space for the community. And the city has actually since acquired the blighted property directly west of the park. So you'll see in the proposed design for Centennial Park that we've slightly shrunken the existing basketball courts and converted them into 2 half-sized courts. And just to the right of the basketball courts, there's a gaming grove that incorporates outdoor ping pong tables and lounge-style swing benches. So that's the gathering space. Then there's also the existing pavilion, which we have remaining where it is, with the addition of picnic tables added below. And then a new path configuration that cuts through the park opens up the lawn to the north, allowing for movie nights or outdoor performances. And then to the west of the lawn, the existing play area is enhanced and expanded with more durable natural play equipment, similar to what Laura was talking about earlier. And then where the gray block at the number 14 is, we're showing a future recreation center that could have operable garage doors that help to provide a connection into the rest of the park. So you could have really an indoor-outdoor connection between both of those community spaces. At the bottom of the page, you'll see that there's a 3-phased plan for this space. So phase 1 includes the basketball courts and the addition of the gaming grove and also the incorporation of the park signage up on the northern corner. In phase 2, a new path network is added and improvements to the lawn and plantings, the stage, additional benches, and picnic tables and the play area are added. And then the final phase 3 would include the addition of that recreation center after both of those vacant parcels have been acquired. So if you want to go to the next park. So the next park then is Raspberry Street Park, which is really just a few blocks west of Centennial Park. And the existing park is split down the middle by a retaining wall that divides a lower paved portion of the park from the lawn and play areas on that upper level there. And this park was actually one of the more lesser known parks, but it still serves a large population of kids in all age ranges, many of whom actually use the open space to ride bikes and skate. So feedback here was really focused on improving and adding amenities such as the playground equipment and also nighttime lighting, incorporation of public art, more seating, and also sports and recreation equipment here as well. So for the design of this park, you'll notice that the existing framework is kept fairly intact. In particular, the lower level remains a large opened paved space, though this could be upgraded with a concrete pavement. It's currently asphalt. And the open plaza space allows for neighborhood festivals and events and could even become a location for setting up the city's mobile skate park. And you'll notice at the number 2, there's actually a drivable ramp. So if desired, you could have food trucks pull up into this space and really create a fun atmosphere. And then if you go over and look at the numbers 7 and 8, you'll see the addition of 2 half-court basketball courts One that has a lower net provided for smaller children to have a place to learn and practice, which was actually directly a result of one of the comments from the community members nearby. And then to the west of there, there's the existing retaining wall, which has a ramp behind it, but we've taken those and sort of pulled them outward in an arc, which helps to provide an accessible ramp to the upper level while also creating a small amphitheater space where you could host community movie nights and have a gathering space there. And then the retaining wall through the middle of the park provides a really great opportunity for a mural. And it also allows us to create this little play loop with these spiral slides that connect from the upper playground level down to the lower level, so kids can run back and forth between the two spaces. The existing play area that's on that northern portion, we're showing expanding and utilizing durable natural play equipment. And then the eastern edge of the upper level has a game area that could be incorporated with outdoor ping pong tables, cornhole, or other outdoor games. And then there's also swing benches along the northern edge, which provide opportunities for relaxing and watching your friends while they're playing. And then around the border of this park, there's a frame of shade trees that have been added and also a low maintenance natural planted buffer. And this is incorporated just to help provide a little bit more shade for the space because currently there's no trees and it's just a really bright, open, sunny space. And then where the number 4 is along the bottom edge there, there's also space for branded park benches that could also double as art or even skatable sculptures for kids. So the final park of the study is the Porter School Park, which is located in the South Side neighborhood at the intersection of Wilkes-Barre Street and Folk Street. And this park is currently a big open space that is inaccessible to the public, but has a lot of potential. So more than 60% of the survey respondents did not know that this was a public park, but over 88% of them are still in support of it remaining a park space. And the big takeaway for Porter School Park was that residents really want this to remain open and green, but they also want to incorporate some light programming and amenities such as seating, lighting, play equipment, and even potentially a dog park here. So for this park, we have 2 different configurations available. Option A on the left sticks to the existing lawn area on the north and keeps the paved parcel to the south open for potential future development, with Burr Street continuing between the 2 parcels. And the design incorporates a paved walking loop, which surrounds a central lawn space that has pockets for play equipment or picnicking or even lounge seating under the shade of some added trees. And then around the outer edge, the existing fence that's up is removed, but separation is still provided from the road by means of a planted border with shade trees and more low maintenance native plantings. And then at the western edge of the site, a corner is carved out as a dog park with space for a running loop, benches for owners to sit, and also obstacles and mounds for the dogs to run and play. And then option B on the right-hand side here shifts things around slightly with the future development parcel on the western portion of the lawn area and has Burr Street dead ending at a walkway into the park, which now spans across and connects the 2 parcels. And this option also has a similar framework with the paved walking loop, benches, interior play areas, and perimeter plantings. But instead of the dog park in this scheme, there are 3 half basketball courts located at the southernmost edge of the site.
So we just jammed about a year's worth of work into 20 minutes. So I want to, I guess before we close, I want to thank Dave Hopkins. He's been just like a really incredible touchstone and a very fun person to work with throughout the last year. And like Dave said, Amy Bocadero has been amazing with helping us network and really make sure that we did a great job at community engagement and connecting with some of the right people. And also Tracy Werner was this incredible partner to help get the word out. Because especially during COVID, what we learned was, it wasn't just about doing these kind of public meetings where people come to us, but it's using existing networks and really meeting people where they're at. So I think the team we worked with made this possible, that we could have this bigger discussion with the city. And so we do have a draft of the master plan that we have provided to council. There's also, for the city's use, there is an appendix that has a litany of every single comment and response that we got from our community engagement. So that can continue to be a resource as the city makes decisions and investments about what should happen here. So I think I just want to thank our team and everybody that has come out and grabbed a pinwheel, wrote a comment, tuned in on these kind of meetings. Because truly what we tried to do here was not possible without the community of Easton. So thank you, everybody, and I think we'll open it up to questions now.
Do we have any hands raised? Lewis? I don't see any.
I don't see any hands raised now. Except for Ken Brown has his hand raised.
Councilman? You're muted, Ken.
That was by mistake. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We do have two panelists that, excuse me. It looks like we have a hand that's raised.
Yeah.
Volcano has her hand raised.
Council, yep.
Okay. Seeing no questions, I'd like to thank Omnis for their efforts. Very enlightening, especially the Historic Park over there in Nesco. It's fascinating. Are there any other questions from the council at this time?
Sandy Volcano has a question.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I think it was a wonderful idea that was used with the pinwheels. The one park is in my neighborhood, and I think some of your feedback. I love the idea of the swings for us older citizens. I'm very, very happy with what you did, and I thank you very much. I think it's, it's something that we can maybe move forward on some of these ideas and proceed and make these pocket parks look a little bit better. I also want to say I'm very happy that you brought to our attention about the cemetery, because I did not know that. So that's something, thank you very much for finding that out. And it must be preserved as that. And I think we should try and get a group together to continue to look into that. Thank you.
I agree with that. Okay, Mr. Councilman Endiger, you want to close the hearing?
Mr. Hopkins, before you run off, I'm going to be moving two resolutions later on, one with the ATC group, design work for the Bushko Drive Super Pumping Station, and one with the Timothy Haas and Associates to conduct a condition appraisal for the Pine Street Garage. If anybody has any questions, Dave, you may ask them at this time. Seeing none, back to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you to our consultants for a great project in the pocket parks. I remember when they had buildings on them and they either burned down or were blighted, and they give us some green space in the neighborhoods now. At this point in our meeting, we've come to public comment on agenda items only. If there's anybody from the public that would like to comment on anything on the agenda, raise your hand. The button's at the bottom of your screen. I don't see anyone with their hand raised, so there's another time at the end of the meeting where you can also ask questions, comments, or concerns about anything concerning the city of Easton. There's no reports received by council, so we'll go right to committee reports. Councilman Brown, Vice Mayor Brown, Finance Committee.
Mayor, we have to do the consent agenda.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I see that. All right, consent agenda. There's two items.
We have a resolution, I'm sorry, for the consent agenda, we have a resolution that would approve various people to various boards and commissions. And we also have an HDC suggestion for 414 Northampton Street.
Dr. Ruggles, you have your hand up?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the consent agenda. Dr. Ruggles.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a problem with the Historic District Commission approval of something that does not meet codes.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a bad precedent. I don't know all of the background or the discussion that occurred at that meeting. Obviously, it was a 4-2 vote, but it bothers me that we have one entity that's kind of overriding our code, and I don't know that they could even build it. I mean, they'd have to go through codes anyway, I would think.
I see Steve Narowski is no longer on. Louis, I mean, I understand the issue. I don't think the HDC can override any building code because no matter what, they just like they can't override zoning code. If it needs a zoning variance, it has to go to the zoning board. If this needs a variance from the Codes Board of Appeal, the owner can certainly do that. The owner can take it to the code appeals board and appeal the code itself, the building code itself, and have it waived if they deem it appropriate. Joel.
Yeah, Mayor, I agree with you. The certificate of appropriateness serves one specific purpose, that it's appropriate. Whether it's permitted is going to be up to the codes office. And you're absolutely correct. If they don't like it, they could file their appeal, and perhaps this would help them with their appeal. But you're absolutely correct. The certificate of appropriateness only has to do with our historic district regulations that have nothing to do with code. I mean, nothing to do. It should be sensitive to code compliance, but it technically that's why you have other experts who deal with the code issues.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on that consent order, consent agenda?
Yeah, I spoke with Steve about it yesterday. I agree with Roger on this. They didn't have a real they thought it was historically appropriate to violate the code. I mean, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Well, I think if you want, Mr. Councilman O'Connell, you can make a motion to accept the consent agenda, knowing that the city council is only approving the HDC certificate of appropriateness as it relates to current code compliance. So that if it doesn't meet code compliance, they have to.
Why don't we simply say this? Why don't we say that not give them a certificate since they're not code compliant?
Okay, Dr. Ruggles.
I mean, I'm just not sure of the normal process here. I mean, it just seemed to me that if they had something that was outside of codes, they should have gone to codes first, gotten whatever they could get as far as a variance or whatever from codes, and then gone to the Historic District Commission. I mean, I think this is kind of backwards.
That's absolutely true.
And
I agree with you.
I mean, I understand, you know, if we approve a certificate of appropriateness, it still has to go to codes and it still has to get approved in codes. So, I mean, with that explanation, I am less resistant to this, let me put it that way. But I think that having a precedent of the Historic District Commission approving something that is against codes, whether it be historical or not, I mean, I think that's a bad precedent.
I agree.
I agree too.
Did you actually vote on this in the consent agenda yet? Because the thing to do is to take it out of the consent agenda then, and have it move it to the a little late in the game, but move it into the non-consensual agenda, And then what Mr. O'Connell suggested may be fine. If you want to set a precedent when you know it doesn't comply with codes, to say that we'll look at these things after we know that the code will accept the proposal, I think that would be as appropriate as a certificate of appropriateness. In
Mayor,
other words, it's not appropriate.
Mayor, could we put, you're looking at the resolution, could we put on here a stipulation that all codes must be met or something like that?
You could add that it must be code compliant or relief appropriately obtained.
Right.
Well, that's going to have to happen anyway, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
but it's a good idea to recognize it up front and put it right into what you passed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
Okay, so you want me to put a stipulation on here that all code that
motion.
Oh, well, okay, that's what I need to know because we already made a motion to approve the consent agenda.
But now they have to amend that. We have to have a motion to amend the motion.
Yeah.
So
I would move.
Mr. O'Connell wants to make a motion to amend the consent agenda to make sure that subparagraph B is code compliant or obtains code relief in a proper procedure. Is that right, David?
Yes.
Good catch.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we're amending, we're amending the, run that by me one more time because I got to tell you I'm lost.
Is amending the certificate of appropriateness to add that it be code compliant or obtain code relief through the normal process.
Okay, I need a second for that then.
I'll second it.
Okay, comments or discussion from council? Roll call.
Okay, first I'm taking a vote on the amendments, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Mr. Ettinger,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano,
Aye.
Mayor Panto,
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Right, and now I'm going to take a vote on the actual consent agenda, which was moved by Dr. Ruggles and seconded by Mrs. Volcano. Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano,
Aye.
Mayor Panto.
Aye.
Okay. Now we have reports of committee.
Yeah, there's reports of council. There's no reports retained. Reports of committee, Councilmember Brown, Vice Mayor Brown, the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything for the agenda this evening other than we met last night and Director Martha Zesky did a presentation to council on a high level overviewing the results of 2020. Although it was very clear, but too early to provide meaningful finance at this time, he said. But the signs are pointing in the right direction. Mark went on to discuss the plans and the completion of the year-end audit in more timely fashion, and he would keep council updated on the progress. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Economic Development Committee, Councilmember Volcano.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, I believe there was a vacant property review committee meeting, which I was unable to attend, but the only thing on the agenda was the property at 1220 Ferry Street. And they probably approved it to move to the next step, but I do not know that for sure. That's all I have.
Well, let's hope they did. The city would like to take control of those two blighted properties. We have with the one, we just need 1220. Okay, thank you, Councilman Volcano, doing a great job on that Economic Development Committee. I know we're keeping you busy. Planning and Code Committee, Councilmember O'Connell.
I just want to thank everybody for their comments, including the public comments regarding the West Ward Historic District Commission. And just reminding everybody that we will be discussing it again at a planning committee meeting on February 9th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Public Safety Committee, Dr. Ruggles. You're muted, Dr. Ruggles.
You're muted, Roger.
I just wanted to report that we did have a meeting last night where the two chiefs from police and fire discussed the amendments that are proposed to the civil service ordinance. And I believe that we took out of that meeting kind of a charge to go forward and look at that ordinance a little bit greater detail. I would like to propose to council that you know, the Public Safety Committee do that, and in conjunction with the two chiefs or whoever else needs to be in on this, and try to put that together. I'd be happy to let the two chiefs comment on that at any point. So go ahead, if you wish.
Thanks, Dr. Ruggles.
Chief Scalzo.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Ruggles. There's really nothing to add from the basic changes I think that we're with here tonight, and I do believe I agree with you that a further review of those the civil service rules and regulations do need to be a deeper dive into making sure everything is exactly as it should be, and then getting that in front of the Civil Service Board at a later time.
Chief Hennings, do you have any additional comment?
I concur with Chief Scalzo, and they definitely need to be revamped.
Okay, I didn't want to put you on the spot there. So, okay, that's all I have, Mayor.
Mayor, you're on mute.
I gave both chiefs a compliment, so I won't repeat it, but they're both doing a great job. But I will vote for this tonight, as I said in our meeting last night and again today. And then Dr. Ruggles, along with the two chiefs, will make a deeper dive into the civil service ordinance. We did have a meeting today again about it with Chief Scalzo, and I think we've come to some conclusions about some of the things that need to be done. We need to just meld both of those since we only have one civil service board now, we should try to make it as uniform as possible between the two departments. All right, moving on to Public Works, Mr. Councilman Eddinger.
I have nothing further to report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Administration Committee, Councilmember Milan isn't here. Report of the City Solicitor, Mr. Scheer.
I have no report to make tonight.
Is Solicitor Clark anything?
I have no report either, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, very good.
We're going to have a meeting to discuss our no reports.
Enjoy yourself, Joel. Mayor's report. I did give you a lot of the update last night. I do want to say winter market went very well. We're getting back to survey responses, and people did extremely well, including those that didn't have a hut, the brick and mortar stores. We've gotten a lot of reports that the winter market, the additional traffic really saved their business for the year. So hopefully we don't see too many closures this year. I do want to mention also that Lafayette College announced yesterday, we had a Zoom town meeting with them, members of the College Hill area, as well as the West Ward Neighborhood Association, the Greg and Reese Development Partnership, and members of our staff. Students will be coming back February 8th. They have in place COVID guidelines, not only CDC guidelines, but if they should get students with it, they have a dormitory just for COVID related students or COVID injected students. And then also on standby, if they need it, would be a motel or a hotel that they have rooms available at also. The dormitory residence halls that are just built will be fully occupied, and the trolley station diner and the college bookstore will open up on April 1st. They didn't want to do it all at the same time, so April 1st. As far as COVID update, I can tell you that you've been reading all about the same problems we're having. I've been in touch with both Lehigh Valley Hospital Network and St. Luke's. Both are doing a great job of getting vaccines out when they have them. Lehigh Valley Hospital Network today gave out injected over 1,000 people. They could do about 5,000 to 8,000 a day, but they only have 1,000 COVID vaccines daily. So they're doing it every day. And I can tell you, St. Luke's is doing the same thing. The one thing I will tell you is that within the city limits, we have no one doing testing or vaccine. So we are going to, just to give you an update, we're going to go to the parking authority. We have a group, the Advanced Lab Solutions, that's out there on Route 248. They have the drive up COVID testing that you can get. They're going to come down. We've worked with them. Lewis and John Kingsley and I met with them yesterday, and they're going to go into the old Main Street offices in the old garage. Again, temporary. Hopefully, it's only another 4 or 6 months that we need COVID tests. They've also applied to give vaccines. So if the state approves them, they are a hospital. It's Dr. Amin's hospital group. If they have medical people on staff willing to staff that every day, and including nights and weekends, for our people to go down and get a vaccine would be great. The testing is important, no doubt about it. But also, City Council, you will see that John Kingsley and Lewis are working on a plan right now that I will make a presentation to City Council. As we told you with that CARES Act money we had last time, we still had about $300,000 left over we were saving for either for vaccine or testing distribution. We're going to put together a plan that for those low and moderate income families and people that do not have health care, that we help subsidize their test. And that'll come up. You'll get a full presentation by John at a later date. But I want you to know that's what we're thinking of. We believe that we need to be involved in, and if we could get Dr. Amin's group to actually give the vaccine, it would be a real great thing. You know, people are telling me when they get the vaccine, it's like a big anchor lifted off their shoulders. They feel more confident now. So we are working with them. I also will let you know that you had the presentation last night, and it's on the agenda tonight for the service lateral lines insurance for our people to voluntarily decide whether they want it or not. I also have on the agenda for Acting Chief Henry Hennings, who you just saw on the Zoom, to be promoted to Chief Hennings formally. I'd like to swear him in tomorrow privately, and then have a formal swearing in at the next council meeting when his family and loved ones can be there to see that. Lewis, under his report, will tell you as we move someone up, we're going to move someone out. And we have a retirement to announce tonight as well. So we're constantly in a state of flux here with employees. We're losing another good person, but we're gaining a chief. So, you know, we're confident that our senior staff is doing a great job. Our employees are coming to work. They're doing a great job every day. Our police and fire have had very few hiccups when it came to COVID. We had a little bit more of a problem in the fire department, which is acceptable because, you know, they live together there. They're sleeping together in the bunk room for 24 hours. So, but we haven't had too much of a problem there. We had a problem for 1 week, and we had very little trouble over the police department. So we're excited about that. And I'll turn it over to Lewis now to finish up the last thing, as I mentioned to you last night, for the public who's on, the one thing that I don't think we're going to have a recommendation to you sometime, probably the second meeting in February, as to whether or not we're going to open the pools or not. We're still working on the year-end numbers. Our goal, again, as we mentioned on October 1st, was not to have any furloughs next year. Opening the pools in COVID-related problem, we have a problem. The YMCA has all their lifeguard certifications have expired. They're having a real problem just getting enough lifeguards just to do their interior pool at their facility, let alone 2 of our pools. And they've expressed us that they felt very strongly that they would have a problem putting lifeguards in our pools this year. So I think if I was a betting man, right now we're leaning towards not opening the pools, which would save us between $50,000 and $60,000, which means that much less money has to be saved in the budget to protect the employees, so there's just no furloughs. But if we do furloughs, we want to do them this last 2 weeks in March, when people are still eligible for their $300 of federal unemployment. So that's why we want to make a decision in February, not in April. We want to make sure that if we are going to have to furlough people, that the additional $300 would certainly help almost bring them to, if not, it may even bring them whole on their take-home pay. So that's my report. I'll gladly answer any questions, but right now I'll turn it over to Louis for any updates, including the return.
The first update and segue to a couple topics is to talk about Frank Caruso. He's given his notice to retire. It's going to effective the beginning of May. And as you know, and for the public, Frank is our IT manager. And to say the least, he's really has done a lot of work here in the city. So we're working through a plan to make a smooth transition. Part of that plan, and well, Frank's reasons for retiring are personal, and I think him and his wife have purchased a place down south. But the way things are operating right now, we are talking about the potentially using him as in a consultative manner after he leaves, just to finish potentially some projects. But we've also have acknowledged the importance of transitioning and bringing someone on board that can continue the momentum forward. You know, one of the projects that the mayor had asked me to address tonight specifically was the private fiber network project. I briefed the directors in our internal meeting that project in itself is moving forward. Crown Castle, the vendor, in which council has already approved the contract with Crown Castle, is doing the necessary logistical work or construction work to move that private fiber network forward. They're actually pulling permits as we speak, and we have some latitude in terms of when we can start the actual service onto that private fiber network. And it looks like it's going to be sometime later in the year, if not the beginning of next year. But that's just a quick update. In general, though, I am going to be bringing Frank in, and perhaps maybe at the next committee meeting, we'll provide just a general IT overview, just so you get a better idea of what's going on from an IT perspective. But we are working through this transition. And just one or two other updates. Number one is the 4th Street garage. The bids are due at the end of next week. So hopefully certainly by the end of February, we may be able to give an update to City Council. I know a couple of you guys have called me with questions, et cetera, regarding the 4th Street garage. And then union negotiations. We're still working with the FOP. We're meeting with them. Actually, I'm going to be meeting with them, with my team this Friday. There is an Act 111 arbitration date set, and that's for May. But regardless, we're going to try to continue to meet and see if we can come to some sort of compromise. And then also the AFSCME union, that contract comes up at the end of this year. So we're probably going to start negotiations fairly soon, just to give you an update on what's going on there. Other than that, I think those are the only updates. There is an item for Councilman Milan on the agenda, Mayor, that has to be approved tonight, and that has to
Being
be
introduced, Mr. Campos.
Excuse me?
It's being introduced.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's an ordinance then. That has to do with the pension contract.
Yeah.
I don't know if the councilman has to be here or not.
No, I can introduce it.
Okay. Those are my updates.
Thank you for the update. I just want to say that when we came into office in 2008, I can tell you that technologically, we were probably in the 19th century. Frank Caruso has moved us to the 21st century. The things that we have today as far as technology is amazing. And what he has done and what he can do is been very good. He's going to be a hard guy to replace, because even during the winter market, he was down there on weekends making sure our cameras were working and everything. And he spent a lot of time. It's our IT position does not pay what it can command in the private sector. Yes, our benefit package is good, but it doesn't, these guys are commanding $150,000, $175,000 a year, and we're nowhere near that. And I just hope we can fill it with someone as good as Frank, because he's really been a good worker. He had municipal background when he came here, and it wasn't just his area of information technology. It was also, as Mark will tell you, his whole expertise when it came to finances, municipal finance, whether it be billing or collections or whatever. He was really good. So we'll have him at one of our meetings before he retires, but I just want to let you know.
Mayor, the other thing that he brought to us, and he was very gracious with this, was our change from the Alpha Building to City Hall, and the network that he did at the new police station.
Yeah, we would have paid a lot more money if we had to pay.
Yeah, I think the biggest legacy also will be this private fiber network. In addition to the strategic position he's put us in within City Hall, meaning mostly everything's in the cloud. He's introduced VoIP. He's helped cut costs. But then the introduction of this private fiber network is pretty significant. And like the mayor said, he's hands-on. He's always been hands-on.
Yeah, and his cyber ransom has been really protected by putting us in the cloud. I mean, there are cities that are paying millions and millions of dollars to get back their records. So has been hijacked. So hacked, I should say, not hijacked. But he's been very good for us. And sometimes I don't like to spend the money he requests, but it's minimal compared to what he could be spending.
I can just say I am tremendously impressed with his variety of skills. I mean, he did everything from putting together the video system for city council chambers. Like Ken said, the police station. I mean, it's going to be a hard job trying to replace that, that skill set. And not many people have that wide variety. So good luck, Louis.
Okay, that's the end of my report. And Lewis's report at school, there's no correspondence. Unfinished business, Madam Clerk.
Okay, we have bill number 1 that was introduced by Mayor Pinto, which would create 2 15-minute parking zones, one in front of 34 North 7th Street, and one going to be placed, the first legal space on the corner of Cole and North of Berwick Street.
Yes, so introduced. So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Ettinger?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pinto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
We have bill number 2 that was also introduced by Mayor Pinto, which would amend the 2021 Open Space Parks Fund budget.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? Again, this is for the Nevin Park to finish that fountain. Only thing I can say is that our economic development projects are going really well. Thank you, Mrs. Volcano, for your help on that, because when we created that fund back in 2009, it's amassed quite a bit of money, and this will finish that project for that neighborhood. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pinto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger?
Aye.
And then under new business, we have an ordinance being introduced by Mayor Pinto, and it would be approving a contract with the PMRS pension fund. They actually administer that pension fund. It's just kind of renewing the contract.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. I will say, as a member of the PMRS board, I can vote for this because I get no remuneration for that. But I will tell you that since I've been on the board, we were looking to go to $2 billion and get to that $2 billion mark. We're now at $3.5 billion. Our pension plan that's with the PMRS, unlike the city managed plans, is about 99.5% funded. The plans with the city, of course, are not as good, but we are doing well, I think, and Dr. Ruggles has been attending those meetings along with Lewis and I. Transferring to our new investment financiers and given the market itself, we've been doing very well, and I'm happy with the returns we're getting. We are now over $67 million in our city managed plans, and when I came into office, I think we were like half of that. So it's been going really well.
That was until today, Mayor, when the stock market went way down.
You didn't have to tell us, Roger.
Yeah, you didn't have to say that.
Okay, roll call.
No, you were just introducing that, Mayor.
That was introduced.
Oh,
okay, we have a resolution being introduced by Dr. Ruggles, which would approve the amendments made to the Civil Service Board rules and regulations.
So move.
Second.
Any comments or concerns?
Roll
call.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano, Mrs. Volcano,
She's muted.
nod your
You're
head.
muted, Sandy.
I heard it.
Mayor Pinto.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger. We have
Sandy, like this or like that, you know.
have a resolution being introduced by Mr. Ettinger, which would approve an agreement with ATC Group Services. It's an engineering design services that will, for our Bushkill Drive sewer pumping station.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second by Dr. Ruggles. Any comments? Roll call.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano,
Aye.
Mayor Pinto,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell.
Aye.
We have a resolution being introduced also by Mr. Ettinger approving an agreement with Timothy Haas and Associates, which is to do a conditional appraisal for the Pine Street parking garage.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Volcano,
Aye.
Mayor Pinto,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles.
Aye.
We have a resolution being introduced by what was supposed to be Mr. Milan. Should I put you down, Mayor? It's to,
That'll be fine. Yeah, I'll be fine.
okay, thank you. Which would amend the 2021 salary and wage ordinance. And all we are doing is changing the titles in the police department and the fire department. Both will be director/chief.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments, concerns? Roll call.
Mayor Pinto,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano.
Aye.
We have a resolution. I'm
Hold
sorry.
on, Madam Clerk. There was a question about this, and I just wanted to reiterate again that the director handles the business of the business and the chief handles the fire or police work. That's why our police chief does both. We don't have a director of public safety. There was a question that came into city council and to my office about why we were doing this. If you remember, it was based on the pension of Mr. Krill. Chief Krill, when he recommended, was in the drop program of the fire department. He had to retire within 3 years. And we wanted him to stay on. He stayed on a little over a year and a half for us to become our chief. So we had to make him just the chief, not the director/chief. So we're going back to the way it was.
Right.
Thank you very much for your support on that.
Okay, we have a resolution being introduced by Mayor Pinto, and it would approve the following promotion within the Easton Police Department, which would be Henry Hennings is now or will be promoted to Director slash chief. Jesus.
So moved.
The fire department.
Second.
Moved in second, discussion.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Ettinger?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Piento?
Aye. At this time in our meeting, we have public comment for anyone would like to say anything about comments, questions, or concerns about the city of Easton. Just raise your hand with the button at the bottom and we'll bring you into the room to speak. I'm not seeing any hands raised. At this
Mayor, I
point,
would like to say one thing.
go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Go. I'd like to give my condolences out to the Ransom family for the
Oh,
loss
wow,
of Melvin, great friend of mine. So
yeah, it was so sad. That was a real shame.
Mayor, I just wanted to say, there was an accident in front of my house yesterday. Car actually rolled over on Lafayette Street, and I actually heard it. I heard it when it rolled, and I have to commend the police and fire that they were out there almost immediately, and they had that entire accident scene cleared well under an hour. And I mean, you have to put the car back up and tow it away and everything. And it was amazingly fast, in my opinion. And so I just want to give them a commendation for really good work on kind of hazardous conditions too. A little slippery out there.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Anyone else? I'll call motion for adjournment.
So move.
Moved by Dr. Ruggles,
Second.
seconded by Mr. O'Connell.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Piento?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
aye.
Mr. Ettinger?
Aye.